How come we can't see God?
Well, that's because God exists outside of our world, specifically the Abrahamic God.
Well, I don't understand why we can't see God, or why we can't see angels, or why we can't see anything that's mentioned in a lot of the world's religious texts.
Well, that's a very interesting question. But I mean, maybe it's because these supernatural beings and creatures and entities, they just exist in a separate dimension or something else similar to that. Or maybe our eyes just aren't really well adapted to seeing these supernatural creatures and beings.
If God is real, why can't we measure him in any meaningful way?
Well, if God could be measured in any meaningful way, he wouldn't really be God, would he? Especially if we're talking about the Abrahamic God. Because the Abrahamic God, like, he would not be all-powerful if we could bring him down to our world and measure him scientifically and in any other type of way.
But isn't that kind of nonsense? Couldn't we at least have some type of kind of like some sort of documentation or photograph of his presence?
Well, I'm not too sure about that, but what about in the Bible or in the other, or I guess because we're talking about the Abrahamic God, so in the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah, or whatever, Hebrew Bible, blah 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 blah.
The Abrahamic God, he interacts with the biblical prophets in a very real way, and he shows his signs and presence to these specific people. So why can't he do that now?
Well, maybe he changed his mind or something. I don't know. Quite honestly, I don't really know about a lot of this. I'm just kind of, I mean, that just because we can't measure or see God doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. He probably has his own type of universe that he's in, or other type of dimension. If he was existing in the same world that we're living in, that would be kind of somewhat chaotic. We wouldn't be able to just, do our normal things if there was like a huge entity looking over us in our own world.
That actually seems very reasonable. That might actually explain a lot about why God cannot be seen in our world. Because I guess it would be sort of a big inconvenience if there was like a huge, gigantic figure looking over us all the time. Maybe this is why God doesn't really reveal himself. Of course, I'm talking about the Abrahamic God. The pagan gods, of course, we can't see them, even though it was claimed in the past that they were on our planet. So who knows about that? But this makes a lot of sense, the Abrahamic God, because if there was a giant creature looking over us at all times, we would not be able to do our things normally, right?
Yeah, that is my kind of sort of explanation for why we can't see God, because it would just be so inconvenient and annoying. And maybe that's why God doesn't reveal himself to us. Specifically the Abrahamic God. The pagan gods probably are kind of just made up, I guess. I don't know, because they were claimed to be on this earth with us, but we can't see them now, so they probably didn't even exist. They were just made up urban legends. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that does actually kind of make a lot of sense. If God was like always above us and seeing us, and we could like directly interact with him, that would be sort of kind of overwhelming and scary and inconvenient. Exactly. Maybe that's why we can't see and measure God. Something to think about. Yes, it is something to think about. Hopefully you do think about this.
Science versus religion. And of course, this is it's kind of, when I say science versus religion, it kind of seems like these two things, science and religion, they're at odds with each other, which is kind of not true. Because, science, especially a little bit in the past, especially in Christian Europe specifically. I don't know about the other parts of the world, but there was a lot of religious people, especially in Christian Europe, a lot of priests, I guess, I don't know, people that are attached to Christianity, right? They were trying to reconcile science and religion. They were trying to use science to kind of prove that religion is true. And so, when I say science versus religion, it's sort of like I guess it's like an oxymoron. It's kind of stupid when I say that, because I'm kind of implying that these two things are they cannot be reconciled. It's just kind of nonsense. I feel like there could be some way to reconcile these two things. Of course, when I say science versus religion, what religion am I talking about? That's also very, very important, because there's a lot of different world religions and stuff. Science can actually kind of help us kind of see which ones are nonsense, right? Because if you look at like a lot of the pagan world religions that existed before the Abrahamic faiths, right? The pagan world religions that were in Europe, in Asia, and Africa, and etc. and etc. You know, a lot of these pagan religions were claiming that, you know, there's these physical gods that are above us and they're kind of ruling over us and stuff, and they're responsible for a lot of the events on our planet and stuff. Blah, blah, blah. You know, the Greek gods, the Roman gods, blah blah blah. These gods were like they were, you know, if you read, I mean, maybe I'm kind of just being dumb because I didn't do any real meaningful research on the pagan gods and stuff and the pagan religions and stuff like this. Maybe specifically the Greco-Roman religions, blah blah blah. I was kind of pulling things from my very kind of, I don't know, from my brain, I guess, from my very small knowledge, base on this. I don't know, from my very limited amount of knowledge on this topic. But you know, the Greek and the Roman gods were I mean, there was also other types of pagan gods, but you know, in a lot of cases, right, a lot of these pagan gods, a lot of the scriptures that were revolving around them, they kind of mentioned that these pagan gods were actually real and they were physical on this planet that we're living in and stuff, and they were interacting with us just like something that would, just like they were interacting with us just like how we interact with animals. They were that real in that way, you know what I mean? Of course, you know, science, because now science very easily and very obviously kind of debunk a lot of these pagan world religions, right? When I say, well, I'm just being kind of stupid. Pagan world religions, not just pagan religions. I don't know, I'm being stupid. Pagan religions, science can kind of just cut through a lot of these pagan religions and stuff. Especially, you know, the Greek gods. Well, you know, they were claimed to be real and physical on this earth. They were claimed to like interact with us, but we can't measure them and see them now. We don't even have any type of, you know, trace of their existence. These supposed pagan gods, the Greco-Roman gods, and the other types of gods that were mentioned around the world, and that were mentioned to be physical entities that were interacting with us. We can't measure these types of gods and see or trace their existence. So, you know, science can kind of, you know, when science versus religion, science can actually kind of debunk a lot of the pagan world religions, you know, and I'm specifying pagan world religions, pagan as in the religions that aren't like that don't have anything to do with the Abrahamic faiths, because the Abrahamic faiths are very, very unique, and I'll kind of explain to you why in just a moment. But you know, the pagan gods, in a lot of cases in Europe, in Asia, and Africa, and the other parts of the world, a lot of pagan gods were claimed to be real physical beings that were existing on this planet with us. They were real in the sense that they were just as real as like you might like kind of go outside and you see like a bunch of different animals, cats, dogs, you know, birds. These pagan gods were real in that way. They were like real creatures that used to exist with us and stuff. But you know, obviously, you know, science now that we have a lot of understandings on a lot of different things relating to this world, right? On a lot of different things relating to like how a lot of how the world functions and stuff like this. Why like tsunamis happen and stuff like this. You know, these pagan gods, right? We can obviously confidently say that there's figments of our imagination. They're not real, because you know, you can go all around the world. You will not be able to find some type of any of the pagan gods that used to be taught, that used to be worshipped and praised in the past. And you know, a lot of the pagan gods cannot be documented or photographed or even traced to be real. They were just old. Even though, you know, this is kind of very bizarre, because they were claimed to be real physical creatures. They were claimed to be as real as like any type of animal you might interact with outside of your house. So you know, but we can't. You know, science now science, we can't like trace any of these gods. We can't see any of these types of gods that were claimed to be real. So it's kind of, you know, science kind of does debunk a lot. It is cut through a lot of these pagan gods, pagan religions. You know, I say pagan as in non-Abrahamic, because the Abrahamic faiths are a little bit different. Even though a lot of you might disagree with this, a lot of you might say, well, we can't see. Well, why is the Abrahamic faith in religion different? We can't see Yahweh or Allah or even Jesus. Because a lot of people would say, well, there's some historical documentation on Jesus and stuff, and there were some accounts on his life and stuff, and blah 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 blah. But you know, the Abrahamic faiths, yeah, they're just the same as the pagan religions and stuff. Allah, we can't see this type of creature on this planet, so why praise him, worship him, respect him? I don't know. And of course, I'm not saying that the Abrahamic faiths are true in any way. I'm just kind of helping you think, right? Because you know, the science versus religion. You know, science
it cuts through a lot of the pagan world religions. A lot of the religions that were kind of that were around the world, right? The Greeks, the Greco-Roman gods, like, where are they? Right? We can't see them. There's literally no documentation on them, no photographs of these Greco-Roman gods. We can't go to any type of archaeological sites and see they're the leftovers of their presence and whatever, anything like this. We can't measure and see these Greco-Roman gods in any meaningful way. Of course, I say the Greco-Roman gods. There's other types of gods. The Indian gods, other types of there's countless world religions and pagan world religions and pagan gods I can speak about. The Greco-Roman gods, Zeus, stuff like this. What I mean? Zeus, something similar to Zeus, I guess. I'm not really too familiar with this with the Greco-Roman gods. They were claimed to be real physical creatures. They were claimed to be just as real as the animals that you would interact with outside your house. But now we cannot even trace even a minute fraction of their existence, and that's because science now can tell us that there are these Greco-Roman pagan gods, they were fictional. They were made up entities. They were not real creatures, or they were not. Even though it's kind of weird because they were claimed. If you read through the Greco-Roman religious texts on these pagan gods, they were claimed to be it was almost as if they were actually they were real. They were like the animals that you interact with outside your house. But science now we can obviously say and claim and see that these Greco-Roman pagan gods were figments of our own imagination. They were just made up entities and creatures. And so science versus religion. Science can literally cut through a lot of the. Science can literally just debunk a lot of the pagan world religions. Right? Science cut through them like nothing, because specifically the pagan gods. Of course, this is why there's a very clear distinction between the pagan gods and the Abrahamic God. Because the pagan gods were claimed to be real entities and creatures that were on our planet with us, but we can't see and measure them now. Right? And that kind of. This kind of cuts through a lot of the pagan world religions and now onto the Abrahamic faiths and the Abrahamic God, because I was saying that the Abrahamic faiths and the Abrahamic God are very unique, right? Because why is that? Because the Abrahamic God is claimed to be existing outside of our physical material world, right? So there's no contradiction between science and the Abrahamic God, because the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified, and that's why the Abrahamic faiths are so unique. Even though a lot of people might say, well, there's a lot of nonsense in the Bible and in the Quran and the Torah and the Hebrew Bible, and there's a lot of contradictions and a lot of absurd things that we can't even document properly and stuff, and we can't prove to be real in any meaningful way. But a lot of you would have to agree that the Abrahamic God cannot be meaningfully falsified, because in the Abrahamic religions and faiths and scriptures, it's claimed that the Abrahamic God is existing outside of our physical material world. The Abrahamic God can't be falsified like the pagan gods, right? Because the pagan gods, the Greco-Roman gods, these other types of pagan gods, blah, 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 they were claimed to be physical, real creatures on the same planet with us, right? They were on this planet. They were physical creatures that were on this planet, and they were just as real as the animals we would interact with outside. But, obviously science now can show us that these pagan gods are just figments of our own imagination. We can't trace their existence at all. They were just literally just made up. But the Abrahamic God is so unique and special because the Abrahamic God is it's alleged and claimed, right, that he is not on the same planet with us. He's outside of our kind of reality and stuff. He just kind of started everything. He just kind of made us and stuff and left us to our own devices, blah blah blah. Of course, he obviously the revelations and stuff came after him, But that's why science versus religion. Really, science debunks. Science versus religion is only an issue if you're. Science and religion can't be reconciled if you're dealing with with a lot of the other world religions that aren't Abrahamic. I believe science, but then again, a lot of people say, well, what? The pagan. You keep. Maybe I'm just being a stupid guy because we can't see Allah, true, or we can't see Yahweh, or we can't see the Abrahamic God, blah blah blah. So why are you kind of making this clear distinction between the pagan world religions and the Abrahamic faiths in regards to science? Because science can debunk the pagan religions. A lot of people say, well, science can also debunk the Abrahamic faiths and the Abrahamic religions and stuff.
and this is kind of just a lot of it is speculation, and there's a lot of different perspectives on this topic. But the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified in any meaningful way and stuff, and that's kind of very unique and special because the pagan gods can be falsified, but not the Abrahamic God, because in the Abrahamic faith, the Abrahamic God is claimed to be existing outside of our physical world, and that's kind of very unique. Not just our physical world, but of course our entire reality and stuff, entire universe, blah blah blah, can go on, and that's very unique and special. And I'm kind of mumbling now, right? But science versus religion. Science cuts through a lot of the other world religions, right? A lot of the pagan world religions, a lot of the religions that used to kind of dominate this planet. Science can show us now that and tell us now that a lot of these pagan world religions are just they were just nonsense, made up. We can't measure or see a lot of these pagan gods, even though they were claimed to be real creatures existing on the same planet with us, but we can't measure or see these pagan gods. So they're just nonsense. And of course, a lot of people say, well, we can't measure or see the Abrahamic God, so he's just nonsense, or it is just nonsense, and blah, blah, blah. But, this is where the Abrahamic faiths and religions are kind of very distinct from a lot of the other major world religions, because the Abrahamic God is immaterial, and that's so unique, because the pagan gods were material creatures. That's why science can debunk a lot of the major, a lot of the pagan world religions. Right? I say world religions, even though paganism is very obscure now. But science can easily kind of cut through a lot of the pagan religions that used to dominate this planet, because the pagan gods were claimed to be real physical creatures, material gods that used to exist on the same planet with us, but we can't see them and measure them now, and that's very isn't that very telling, right? That these pagan gods were just figments of our own imagination. They weren't real, even though they were claimed to be physical material gods. We should be able to kind of document and kind of trace their presence, but we can't do that because these pagan gods were just figments of our imagination. I say our, even though these gods were made up by people that kind of existed before we were even born. I don't know. So science versus religion. Science cuts through a lot of the pagan world religions, but the Abrahamic God is kind of unique and special and different, because the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified, because it's claimed that the Abrahamic God is a immaterial. It exists outside of our physical reality and universe and stuff. So that's kind of science versus religion. Science knocks out a lot of the other pagan world religions, right? Of course. And then a lot of atheists might still disagree with me, and they might say, well, it also knocks out the Abrahamic faith as well, because the Abrahamic God cannot be proven to exist in any meaningful way. You can't see or trace his presence in any meaningful way. There's no documentation on his existence at all in any meaningful way. So science doesn't only knock out the pagan world religions, it knocks out the Abrahamic faith. But a lot of you atheists and a lot of scientists and whatever would still have to agree that the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified, and that's so special, because the pagan gods could easily be falsified, right? Because the pagan gods were claimed to be physical, real entities and creatures that used to exist on this planet with us, but we can't. There's no archaeological evidence for them at all, and that's very suspect, obviously, and that's very telling that they were not even real to begin with. But of course, the Abrahamic God was never claimed to be material in the first place. Material, as in like a physical creature on this planet with us in the first place. That's very interesting, and you should help you think about this a lot, right? This is why the Abrahamic faiths are so special, right? Because the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified at all in any meaningful way. Falsified. Of course, you could say, well, we can't falsify like imaginary trolls and demons and stuff like this. Of course, I'll agree with you with that. But a lot of you would also have to agree with me and say, that the pagan gods, a lot of them were claimed to be physical, material gods, right? And in that sense, we could just easily falsify them because we can't. There's no archaeological evidence that these pagan gods even existed in the first place. The Zeus, right? Do we have his footprints? Do we have like his blood or something similar? His bodily fluids? No, of course not, because he was not even real to begin with. He was just a figment of the ancient Greeks or whoever made, or some other type of ancient people's imagination. Blah blah blah. It's kind of but the Abrahamic God, to begin with, was not even claimed to be a physical material entity, and that's so special. That's why the Abrahamic faiths and the Abrahamic God is so unique and special in this regard, in regards to like science versus religion, because the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified, proven to not be real in any. Of course, a lot of you might come at me and say, "Oh, you're just being a kind of a dumb guy." Just because we can't prove the Abrahamic God to not be real, we can't. That means nothing, because we can't prove him to be real in the first place. So he's on the same level, or it's on the same level as like any other type of imaginary construction, any other type of
fictional, I don't know, construct. That's not that's just kind of conceptual. I don't know, not material. You know, I'm kind of mumbling with my words again, but you know, you still would have to agree that the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified in any meaningful way, proven to not exist, because the Abrahamic God, you know, unlike the pagan gods, you know, because they were claimed to be physical creatures on this planet, of course, but there's no archaeological evidence these pagan gods even existed to begin with, even though they were claimed to be physical, real creatures on this planet with us. But you know, the Abrahamic God, to begin with, was not claimed to be a material, physical God. He was like something that's beyond our physical, material reality and universe and stuff. And that's why, you know, the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified, just because of the fact that it's claimed to be completely immaterial and beyond our physical reality and something that's kind of very unique. Even though, of course, the Abrahamic God also I would have to agree with a lot of atheists and stuff like this and scientists. That might be against religion, and because you know the Abrahamic God cannot be proven to exist, of course, in any meaningful way as well. But it can't be falsified, unlike these pagan gods, because these pagan gods can be completely falsified and proven to be just not real. Because they were claimed to be physical creatures on this planet with us, and so you know there's no archaeological evidence that these pagan gods even existed. Blah, blah, I'm kind of mumbling with my words. You know, science versus religion. Really, science versus religion. Science knocks out a lot of the pagan world religions, pagan as in non-Abrahamic. You know, because you know these other pagan world religions. I so derogatory and kind of mean and stupid. Pagan. Really, there's so many different there were so many non-Abrahamic religions out there. I'm just kind of putting them all into this category of pagan. You know, this kind of stupid term that was made up to kind of degrade like a lot of other religions that used to exist around the world. But it's too convenient. Right? I can't just name you all of the other world religions. It would kill too much time. That's why I have to kind of put them all under this umbrella term pagan. Even though I know it's somewhat derogatory. I know it's not really nice to use this term. It's kind of stupid as well. A pagan. What is a pagan? Someone that doesn't believe in the Abrahamic God is kind of course, this is all just for convenience, right? But, you know, the other pagan world religions, right? Science knocks them out because these other pagan world religions, a lot of these other pagan gods were claimed to be physical, real creatures on this planet with us, but of course there's no archaeological evidence that these pagan gods were even real to begin with, that we can't trace their existence in any meaningful way, even though, again, I'm kind of mumbling again and repeating myself, even though these pagan gods were claimed to be physical, real creatures and entities on this planet with us. That's kind of, science kind of knocks this out of the park, because science can show us and tell us that they were, these pagan gods, even though they were claimed to be real physical creatures, there's no archaeological evidence that they're real, that they even existed to begin with. We can't trace any type of physical, we can't trace their existence to any physical location or place. We can't see these pagan gods. Even they should, these pagan gods, they should still be around. We should be able to see them up in the sky, but they were claimed to be real and physical, and they were supposed to be on the same planet as us. And so, science can obviously show and tell us and prove to us that these pagan gods probably were just nonsense and made up of figments of our imagination. The pagan gods can be falsified. Science can help us falsify these pagan gods by showing us that they're not real, because there's no archaeological evidence. There's no any other type of meaningful evidence to prove that they're real, even though they're claimed to be they're literally claimed to be physical material gods on our planet with us. But there's no proof that they're real, so that's kind of very unique and special. That's why the Abrahamic God's very unique and special, because unlike these pagan gods that can easily be falsified, the Abrahamic God was never claimed to be on this planet with us. He was claimed to be existing beyond our physical world, the universe, reality, whatever. So science versus religion, really, science versus religion. Science knocks out a lot of the pagan world religions, a lot of them. My camera just kind of overheated, and the video kind of just ended too quickly. But science versus religion. Science knocks out a lot of the pagan world religions. That's true. But the Abrahamic God cannot be falsified, and that's something that's very unique and special. You should really kind of really think about that. Think about that. Right. The pagan world religions can be proven to not be just nonsense. But the Abrahamic God wasn't claimed to be physical in the first place or material, so
It's kind of very unique and special in that regard. And you know, I don't really have a lot more to say. You know, just really think about this a lot, right? All of the things I mentioned in this video. Just really make sure you you focus your mind and think about this a lot. All right.